Welcome back to another episode of Speaking Tongues. I'm here today with Mikhl. Born in Detroit, Michigan, Mikhl Yashinsky is a Yiddish playwright, performer, translator, and teacher, now based in New York City. He has appeared with the National Yiddish Theater Volksbühne, in the Yiddish Fiddler on the Roof, directed by Joel Grey, and in the title role of classic operetta The Sorceress, and recently put out two books in his translations from Yiddish: The Mother of Yiddish Theater, Memoirs of Esther Rochel Kaminska, and Adventures of Max Spitzkoff, the Yiddish Sherlock Holmes. Mikhl, I'm so excited to welcome you to Speaking Tongues today. How are you?
I'm great, Elle. Thank you. I'm glad to be here and wonderful job pronouncing all that Yiddish. We're off to a great
Oh,
start.
I'm so happy. I'm so happy. I like to start each episode with the same question, which is, what is your first language and which languages have you learned to speak?
Mhm. My first language is English. I grew up speaking English with my parents in Detroit, but my grandparents spoke Yiddish. One of my grandmothers came from, as we say, the alte Heim, the old country, the old home.
Mhm.
She came from Belarus, from a city called Brisk. She's still living. My other grandmother, who's passed away, she was born in Detroit, but she was a Yiddishist, really into the Yiddish culture. And although a secular Jew, was really into the language and the culture. And I grew up hearing those two grandmothers speaking Yiddish to each other. That was something they had in common. One was very secular, one was very religious, but
Mhm.
they had this language that was a sort of bridge between them.
I see.
So I grew up being interested in it, not really studying it until a good deal later in my life, in my mid 20s. But in between, I studied and learned Hebrew and German and Spanish.
So, what was that like growing up with your Yiddish speaking grandmothers? And often, maybe we don't think of things with such depth. But as you're, I guess, grown up, and you're reflecting back on this period, what was that like? And how do you feel your relationship to Yiddish was at that time?
hmm Yeah, it's really interesting. I remember my mom used to sort of play a game with us when we'd be in the car, where she'd ask us, now, how many Yiddish words do we use at home that you
Mm,
can think of?
mhm.
So we weren't really speaking Yiddish all the time at home, but my mom and dad did throw in a lot of Yiddish words. And my mom liked us to be cognizant of that, of how much we understood and how much we knew. Uh, that reminds me of Franz Kafka. He was a German speaker, but he was very into Yiddish.
Okay.
And he put on an event in the Prague Town Hall of Yiddish theater for German-speaking people in Prague.
Okay.
And one of his main lines was, "You all understand more Yiddish than you know."
Mm,
Um, it was interesting. I think I developed an appreciation for it, a deep appreciation for it, largely through this secular grandmother who she received a Yiddish journal at home, and she had Yiddish books and movies on her shelves that she would share with me. And it was from her that I came to understand, I think, more than a lot of other young American Jews might, the depth of Yiddish culture, and that this is not just a sort of funny language. It's actually a whole kind of civilization
mhm.
that we have to hold on to. And a lot of Yiddish words I got from her. I actually, after she passed away, I started compiling a list of the words and expressions that I knew from her and that I don't necessarily hear everywhere, even as a Yiddishist. And some, as a child, sounded to me almost like, I remember one is she would say "functionun."
Function.
Yeah, if someone was going on about something that they'd already gone on about before, she'd say sort of sarcastically, "Ah, "functionun," which sort of almost sounded to me like, I don't know, not like Yiddish maybe. But later I learned it was "fangt schon an," which
Mhm.
she sort of made into one kind of word, and it means beginning already beginning, meaning like this person is starting all over again with the same stuff.
Mhm.
So yeah, I got a sense of the richness and the humor and all of that from her. And she was a great person to actually start speaking with. Once I started to learn to speak the language, she was the first person I really had conversations with.
I
Yeah.
see. What was community like in Detroit? Was there a Yiddish speaking community that you and your family were taking part in and communicating with?
There's definitely a lot of Jews in Detroit of Yiddish speaking heritage,
Mhm.
not necessarily one they've kept up with in a very active way.
Okay.
So growing up, it was mostly the older generation that I would
Right.
hear
Okay.
speaking Yiddish, much older generation. Lately, in recent years, because it's taught at the University of Michigan, which I taught the language there for a little while, there's growing a little community of younger Yiddishists. But I had a lovely contact with one group once I kind of was in my mid 20s and on my way to this sort of Yiddish career. I was invited to speak with this group of women who had been meeting in each other's homes for decades, and they called themselves the Freiliche Freund, which means the happy friends.
Hmm.
And they were just a group of Yiddish speaking women who would meet in each other's homes for tea and to hear lectures and to speak in Yiddish. So that was not something I knew about growing up, but
Right.
I found out about when I was older, and I went to them and gave them a talk about the summer I had spent learning Yiddish in Vilna. I had just spent a summer studying Yiddish in Lithuania.
Mhm.
So I went and reported back on that to them. And that was special. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I asked that question because I'm always curious when we have a community of speakers of a language from another part of the world here in the US. And generationally, sometimes it seems like that language doesn't get passed on
Yeah.
from one generation to the next. So even as I'm thinking about the story that you were telling, you had your grandmothers who spoke it, but your parents didn't speak it. And you're that third generation, so you're learning this, but you have an interest in it. So it's not necessarily something that everyone in your
Yeah.
generation of that would take on.
Yeah.
So I guess, and not to spend too much time on this, but I guess like in your generation, did you notice that there were other kids or other people you were growing up with who had this interest in learning Yiddish, or were they kind of like, oh, that's grandma's thing, that's
Hmm.
grandpa's thing?
It's exactly as you say. It's not necessarily the most natural thing that people of our generation will sort of take up these ancestral languages if they
Mhm.
haven't been actually directly transmitted to us. So it does take a bit of special curiosity and a sort of activist spirit, I think, language activism. I don't think growing up, no, I didn't really notice that among my peers in terms of taking on this language. There was some degree of curiosity, I'm sure, and a certain charm it held for us because it was grandparents' language or great grandparents.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, well, I grew up being sent to Jewish day school, and in the Jewish day schools, it's already for decades in America, the focus is Hebrew language.
Okay.
So we already were, I guess, pretty busy learning another Jewish language and written in a different alphabet and wrestling with that. And I think I would have loved to have Yiddish also have a presence in the school, but it wasn't at all part of our curriculum.
Mhm.
I remember in high school, a Hebrew teacher I had named Mora Mali. Mora just means teacher in Hebrew. But she had us for Holocaust Remembrance Day learn a Yiddish lullaby, a famous Yiddish lullaby called Rosin Kismet Mandlin, Raisins and Almonds.
Mhm.
That was really the first like sort of complete Yiddish song I learned.
Oh, wow.
So I give her a lot of credit. This wasn't part of her purview. It wasn't She wasn't expected to teach us any Yiddish, but she thought if we're going to have this Holocaust remembrance ceremony, they should learn a bit of the language of the majority of the victims.
Mhm.
So that, yeah, I give her credit for that. I think moments like that can really spark something,
Yeah.
and you might not take them up immediately, but they'll be in there and you might be able to access them later. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I believe in that too. I think
Yeah.
kids need to be exposed to all kinds of stuff, and
Yeah.
you never know what they'll latch on to and where
Exactly.
their futures will take them.
Yeah.
I'd love to know about Yiddish itself. Let me just say this because I am a fool. And I think I might have mentioned this before, but I told you that when I would think about Yiddish growing up here in New York City, I never really thought of Yiddish as its own thing and never thought of Yiddish as something that was, spoken currently. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, but I always associated Yiddish, or I thought Yiddish was something of the past. I thought that Yiddish was not really widely spoken or not really. I'm learning a lot as I'm doing this show, which, my views have completely changed. So I'm not a big dum dum
Mm,
anymore. But I'm excited to learn about Yiddish because there are things that I've learned about the language that I didn't even think anything about. So I'd love to hear about Yiddish and just kind of what it sounds like and
yeah.
um, how the language works
Hmm.
and any interesting features that you find about the language. Do we have particular greetings for certain people?
Mm.
And what sets it apart or connects it to other languages?
Yes. First, let me just say you're not at all dumb for not realizing for not realizing that it's a living and present language, because I'd say many, many people who are or should be inheritors of this language, Jewish people, don't think of it as a living language. But it is out of a lack of knowing. And a lot of people want to sort of relegate it to the past. They think it represents a part of our history that's a history of persecution and
Mhm,
being victims, a
mhm.
language of the ghettos, etc.
Okay,
But it's it's a language of everything. It's of life,
absolutely.
and of sadness and happiness and all of that contains, and of history and the present and the future. Basically, it's a Germanic language. It comes from originally Jews were living in German-speaking lands in around the year 1000, and they were speaking the language of their neighbors, German. But eventually it started morphing into a language of its own. They were writing it in Hebrew characters and incorporating words from rabbinical texts from the Talmud and words from the Bible in Hebrew, and really started becoming very much its own language, especially when Jews were expelled from Germany in the Middle Ages, as they were out of almost every European country, and settled in Slavic lands in Eastern Europe, which welcomed them, and it started taking on all these Slavic influences. So it's a sort of Germanic language with words from Slavic language family and from Semitic language family. Some people think of it as sort of a very guttural language, which I think
Mhm.
is true. There is a lot of importance of that ch sound. Whereas in modern German today, you have that ch. Sometimes it's ch and sometimes it's sh. Whereas in Yiddish, it's always just ch. It's always the sort of harder one.
Okay.
And then in Hebrew, you have actually two letters that make that sound. You have a ches and a chof, and they both make the sound ch. So that's a very present sound in the language, I'd say.
Mhm.
It has a lot of cognates to English, which makes it actually, I think, not too hard to learn for an English speaker, because as English is a Germanic language, so is Yiddish. There's a lot of cognates. But it also helps to know German and know Hebrew. Those are good base languages. You don't need to know them. And maybe if you don't know them and learn Yiddish, your Yiddish might be even better, in a way, because you don't have the sort of influence from those languages,
Mhm.
confusing you. But I had both those languages, and I found those were useful. What else? There's cases. That's a difficult thing.
Okay.
So there are grammatical cases, accusative, dative, nominative, a bit of a genitive. But once one gets a handle on those, I mean, people don't realize we do have something like them in English too, although it's sort of fallen away. But we still say who and whom and
Mhm.
things like that, and he
Right.
and him. And those are ultimately different sorts of, one is a subject, one is an object, and that's what cases govern, really.
Yeah.
Fun things about the language. I mean, you had mentioned in one of your notes to me reduplication, and I thought that was an interesting thing to ask about.
Mhm.
There is a sort of famous example of it in Yiddish where you can take one word and say it again, but instead of the first consonant, you replace it with shma to make fun of it.
Like
Uh,
fancy schmancy?
Exactly. So
Oh
that
my
that
gosh.
comes from Yiddish ultimately.
Ah, I that.
Yeah, like if you look up just the letters shm in a Yiddish dictionary, it has an entry for it. It says prefix that precedes or replaces the initial letter of a word, creating forms expressing disdain. So as in Geld schmelt. Geld is money. So
Hmm.
Geld schmelt, they define as money. Who gives a damn about it? Yeah, or Essen schmessen. Who cares about eating? Which I feel like no one would really say that. But yeah, Kultur Schmultur, culture schmultur. I mean, that really is from Yiddish, and we have it in English from Yiddish, as we have many things. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I We'll talk about this later, but I made a quick list off the top of my head of words that are part of our vocabulary
Yeah.
that I feel like come from Yiddish, and I want to ask you about that later. But I think I think that's a really fun fact. That's really
Mm.
interesting. And Essen, does that mean eat or food?
Both.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right.
Yeah.
Context clues.
Yes. Yeah. That's the verb to eat and also the noun food. Yeah.
Okay. All
Mm.
right. Oh, this is so exciting.
Mm.
Is there anything that you've noticed about the way the language has changed over time or has changed through migration? I guess in a way that people may have spoken in Eastern Europe or in Germany, let's say 100 years ago, 100 and X amount of years ago,
Yeah.
to now. How have you noticed language shifts that have happened?
Oh, definitely. So the largest population speaking Yiddish today is actually Hasidic Jews,
Mm-hmm.
who their greatest population is right here in Brooklyn.
Okay.
But they also live elsewhere in Antwerp and in Montreal, and they speak Yiddish. They maintain it as a daily language, and
Mm-hmm.
one of the fundamental reasons being that one, it keeps them as a community unto itself, and they're very careful about maintaining their community, especially post-Holocaust. The Satmar Hasidic community in Williamsburg, they're a community largely descended from Holocaust survivors. So it's a matter of this tying us together, and we need to keep together. And this helps us, this language, but also Hebrew. We could speak Hebrew, but no, Hebrew is a holy language.
I
It's
see.
Lashon Kodesh, as it's called. So it's not fit for everyday purposes. So
Okay.
anyway, they maintain Yiddish as a daily language. And if you go to Borough Park or Williamsburg, you'll hear a lot of Yiddish spoken on the streets and see Yiddish signs. The thing about their Yiddish is it's got a lot of English in it. Just from years of living right in the heart of New York, a lot of English has crept in, so it's almost a sort of Yinglish. And that's interesting. It definitely sounds different than what would have been spoken in Europe 100 years ago. But it's still Yiddish, but it's like, for instance, Fenster means window, but they don't always say Fenster. They'll say Winde, or they'll use the word teacher instead of lehrer, which is a teacher, but they'll use teacher to mean specifically a teacher of secular topics.
I see.
You can really hear that change and that migration in the language, but you can also see that in if you look at Yiddish newspapers printed in New York in the 1920s, before that migration of those particular Hasidic Jews. This is just among secular Jews who had moved here between 1880 and 1920 when there were great waves of Ashkenazic immigration to the US. You
Mhm.
see in those newspapers a lot of English creeping in, written in Yiddish characters. I remember reading a recipe from the 20s. It said in the title, in the headline, Yiddish, in the Vorwärts, which is a newspaper that still exists,
Mhm.
Salmon roast. And I was like, what are these words? I was trying to figure out what Yiddish words these are, but I realized it was salmon roast.
Yeah.
It wasn't Yiddish words, but it was written in Hebrew characters.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Uh,
Yeah, and it's something I need to always keep in mind when I'm translating something for the Hasidic community, as I'm sometimes called to do as one of my jobs. So I was recently translating a text about a pamphlet about conserving energy in the home and tips for that. But it's targeted towards the Hasidim. So I need to not write necessarily in my Yiddish. I need to actually incorporate some English for words that they just say in English, and they don't know the Yiddish word for them anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. And I
Yeah.
I would imagine that is similar to, as you mentioned, Yiddish speakers who are in Antwerp. There might be Dutch or
Exactly.
in there, and in Canada there might be some French in there as well.
Totally. Totally. Yeah.
Mhm. This versatility is great, and I
Mm.
think how it shows how much having a language that can be versatile, or people use it in such a versatile way, it says a lot and encompasses so much history,
Mm.
just in observing, like you said, a newspaper, a publication from in Yiddish, and I'm
Mm.
sure even reading over time, like the forward, you said it must show that history over time and the way that the language is used. So that's
Oh,
really interesting.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was actually, I mean, the forwards is a really interesting case because it's gone through these shifts where it was at one time, at that time of sort of peak immigration, it was really open to those sorts of influences and to writing kind of in the way that the Yiddish immigrants in America were speaking and not being too precious about English entering. Whereas later it took a harder stance and said, no,
Mm.
we need to maintain this language in its sort of purity. And there were actually protesters of Yiddishists apparently outside the Forwards building
Hmm.
saying you need to start spelling in the standard Yiddish spelling manner because their spelling was sort of sloppy and didn't adhere to certain respected standards.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so now, I mean, the Forwards, its use of Yiddish is in a way symbolic. I mean, most of the people who read the forwards can read an English newspaper today,
Mhm.
and would have an easier time reading an English newspaper.
Yeah.
But the use of Yiddish in it is, it's kind of almost, the paper is about the use of Yiddish in a way. So now the language has to be refined in a way that it holds on to this language and shows people this is how this language is spoken or ought to be spoken.
Yeah. What do you think led to that backlash that people were showing toward the paper?
For decades, it had carried on in this sort of natural, non-precious kind of attitude towards the language and was
Mhm.
spelling kind of however and was incorporating English words. And it was at that time, I think this was maybe the 70s, it was Yiddish had taken on as a sort of place that it occupies today, where it's almost its own kind of, I mean, it's still a living language, but it's almost become its own kind of holy language in the way that other people consider Hebrew a holy
I
language.
see.
After the Holocaust, it was the language of the martyrs and everything. It became very personal for people. We need to speak it. We need to maintain it in this way. This is how we heard it. This is the way we see it written in our greatest works of literature.
Uh-huh.
And in a way, to sort of honor it, we need to be very careful about it.
Okay.
There's this rabbi who wrote a beautiful essay about Yiddish, I think Soloveitchik, and he wrote that Hebrew is the holy language, but Yiddish is, it occupies the same status of holiness as, say, a Torah cover might occupy. The Torah itself is holy, but you drape it in this velvet mantle, and that mantle is what he says is an appurtenance of holiness. It sort of enwraps holiness and contains holiness. So although Yiddish is, he says, is not inherently holy, it's a sort of vessel of holiness because it's held the hopes and fear and love and faith of the Jewish people for so many centuries.
I understand.
So that's a nice thing. That's something I like to think about. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. As a Yiddishist and someone who has worked and made so much of your life's work about the Yiddish language and holding on to it, sharing it, teaching it, translating it, what does that term mean to you? How does that make you feel?
Mm,
And what are some things you associate with being a
mm,
Yiddishist?
mm. Yeah, I definitely like the term. Some people, I don't know, don't like identifying with an ism or being an ist of some kind. But
Hmm.
for me, this is a fine thing to have an ism about language and culture. It basically, to me, it means someone who is invested in a language, who is committed to it in some way or another, and believes in its value, especially to me as a living language, so is committed to speaking it, writing in it, using it. To me, that's a Yiddishist. Yeah. It's sort of funny in New York, there's this kind of almost turf war between the Chassidim and the Yiddishists,
Is
where
this something you can talk about? I mean, don't get yourself in trouble.
yeah, no, definitely. The Yiddishist is it's become almost a dirty word for a lot of Hasidim because to them, Yiddishists are people who care about the language at the expense of everything else.
Mm,
Maybe have thrown out the laws of Judaism and the religious traditions and practices and a Jewish way of life in favor of just language. But to me, that's not really what it means. You can be invested in all of that too. And you can love all of that too and have respect for it and also be a Yiddishist. But there is sort of this grappling over who has the right Yiddish and who has the right attitude to Yiddish. But
wow.
yeah, moments where we can bridge the gap and come together are really nice. And there are those too. Some friends of mine started actually a book club for Yiddishists, more secular Yiddishists and Chassidim to come together and read Yiddish literature together.
Okay.
So that's been really nice. Eventually, it's turned out that like not as many Chassidim come,
Oh
but
no.
at the start there were quite a few meetings with a nice mix, and now it's sort of become more of like one friend group of secular Yiddishists that mostly comes. But who knows? It might shift again. Yeah,
Yeah, I hope so.
yeah.
We're all New Yorkers. We gotta
Yeah,
be forget all that other stuff. We gotta,
exactly.
you know, and speaking of New York, something that I really find fascinating about history in New York City, is the history of Yiddish theater.
Mm.
And I remember, you know who it was? The last time we spoke, I couldn't remember his name, and I looked it up. Fivish Finkel.
Mm.
And toward the end of his life, and I know he was performing up until his last days, but he's unfortunately passed away.
Yeah.
But he was very, I remember watching an interview with him probably on like CBS Sunday Morning or something, but he was talking about the history of Yiddish theater in New York City and what he was doing. I think he had a one-man show or he had a
Mm.
small performance where he was paying homage to that history and wanting people to understand how big a deal this is in New York City and was in New York City, and this
Mm.
legacy that was there and how much he was a part of that. And then that's when I went in the rabbit hole. This was years ago, after that interview, because I didn't know. And then
Mm.
just learning about the theaters that were down on the Lower East Side, and
Yeah.
the famous actors and actresses who were a part of this
Mm.
community and this theater community.
Yeah.
Um, and it's such a huge deal. I'd love to talk about the prominence of that, and I'd love to know about your performance in the
Mm.
Yiddish language production of Fiddler on the Roof,
Yeah.
and what was it like being a part of such an iconic
Mm.
story and this storied history of Yiddish theater.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a storied history and a rich tradition that you can see still some visible remnants of if you go to the Lower East Side and walk down Second Avenue, which was the sort of thoroughfare of this Yiddish theater district. At one time, there were dozens of theaters,
Right.
but some are still there, although they serve other purposes. For instance, the Village East Cinema is
Mhm.
a great movie theater in the East Village, but built as a Yiddish theater, actually built for that purpose. And it's still in the sort of rotunda inside. You can see a Star of David and a beautiful design. And there are Hebrew letters outside indicating the year that it was built,
Mhm.
in the 20s, stuff like that. There's still a building that's called the Hebrew Actors Union, which was the union of the Yiddish actors. It was called Hebrew Actors because Hebrew at that time was used as a sort of designation for Jewish people. So
Okay.
they're Hebrew actors and that they're Jews, but they were Yiddish theater actors.
Mhm.
But that building is still there, and you can see the name of it on it, although it's not an active building. It would be my dream to one day put on a Yiddish theater production, say in the Village East Cinema, and
Yeah.
have it return at least one night or a few nights to being a place of Yiddish theater would be really cool.
Hmm.
But when I've put on Yiddish theater, and as I've been lucky to do in New York, it's been kind of all over. Now Yiddish theater is a sort of wandering tradition, which is appropriate for the Jews, but going from one place to another and finding places to put on Yiddish theater. This Fiddler was a great success.
Hmm.
That became a sort of surprise hit, this Yiddish language Fiddler. Partly, I think, because the story is so well known,
Yeah.
but people really, I think, also, and the director was very well known, Joel Grey, a very beloved person,
Hmm.
but also people were, I think, very excited about the idea of hearing this story, which was based on a Yiddish writer's short stories, Sholem Aleichem's short stories, told in Sholem Aleichem's language, in the sort of original language of these stories,
Yeah.
and the language the characters would be speaking. So it felt really kind of authentic to people. I remember people leaving the performance and saying it was like I was there in the shtetl,
Oh,
of my grandparents or whatever it was. They felt
yeah.
themselves there, which was really, I think, a tribute to the power of language because the production was very minimalist.
Hmm.
It was pretty much a bare stage. There were paper hangings behind us that sort of recalled parchment of the Torah, but very bare and not elaborate costuming or anything. But it
Hmm.
was the language really that made them feel they were in the shtetl.
Yeah.
So that was powerful. And it's been a great thing to be a part of. We kind of keep returning to it. We were supposed to run for, I think, 5 weeks or 7 weeks one summer, but
Hmm.
instead we ran for a year and a half. And
Wow.
then we had a revival. And then a few months ago, we were in LA doing a sort of concert version of it. So, yeah, definitely lucky to have been a part of that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really exciting because
Mm,
Fiddler is huge. Like Fiddler is
yeah.
Fiddler. Anyone who loves theater or
Yeah.
was even a theater kid like yours truly, like
Mm.
we all have seen the Fiddler and we know it. What role were you in that production?
A couple of supporting roles. Nachum the beggar, who
Okay.
he gets introduced actually in the opening scene as one of the three sort of representative characters of the shtetl and has this funny exchange. And then my character for the rest of the show, after that opening tradition number, was Mordechai, the innkeeper. He's the innkeeper whose inn they go to for the L'chaim scene. And he has actually a pretty long monologue at the wedding scene, the climactic wedding scene where he's greeting the guests and introducing the gifts and all of that. Yeah.
Hmm. Were your castmates and fellow cast members Yiddish speakers to start with, or did
Mm,
you notice any learning curves in the language, in
mm,
learning their lines and stuff?
yeah. Chiefly not Yiddish speakers.
Okay.
So this company, the Volksbühne, it would have at one time been all Yiddish speakers decades ago, of course. But now it's a different scene for Yiddish theater and Yiddish generally. And they prefer to select from a pool of just, wonderful actors, singers, dancers, and train them in the Yiddish lines. So that's what they do. There were a couple other Yiddish speakers in the cast, but I was called upon a lot behind the scenes to help people with their Yiddish,
Mm-hmm.
which I was glad to do. They would come to me, especially for pronunciation help, but also help in devising little improv bits because there are moments where, you know, there's some hullabaloo on stage and the crowd is shouting at each other about something and they can't break into English for that, but they also can't improvise in Yiddish. So
Yes.
they would come to me for help in sort of crafting lines for them, which was
Hmm.
fun. Some did learn more than just their lines, which was lovely to see. I had a castmate, James Stefko, who's a friend who started studying a bit and actually was at the end able to read Yiddish characters, Hebrew characters,
Hmm.
and sound them out. And I have a friend, Jordan Porch, who is on the sound team. But as a member of the sound team, she was, and mixing the show, she was having to listen to the language for 3 hours every performance,
Hmm.
8 times a week, and was really immersed in it and has kept up with it. And she actually speaks Yiddish now. And that was a rare case. Jordan Porch, shout out to her because I think, yeah, an audio person definitely is not expected to learn the language. But she did. She had a special curiosity. Yeah.
You've got a new play, a modern
Mm,
drama that you're
mm,
producing, The Gospel According to Chaim.
mm,
And tell me about it. Tell me about producing this, and what does it mean to you to help create something new in the Yiddish canon of Yiddish
mm.
theater canon?
Yeah, this play, it's a sort of, we had a production of it a year or two ago. I have a poster of it. Just thought I'd show it as I have it. But this is the Gospel according to Chaim, the Psura Loit Chaim,
Hmm.
when we did it actually in the East Village, really right near the former Yiddish theater district. So that was exciting to do. A new play that's based on a story that I learned about when I was working at this place called the Yiddish Book Center. Basically, in short, it's the true story of a Jew who found Christianity and took on this new faith and wanted to spread this faith to his fellow Jews.
Hmm.
And to do so, he translated the New Testament into Yiddish for the purpose of evangelizing to fellow Jews. And of course, this was not an uncontroversial thing to do.
Right.
Um, so the play is all about his attempt to get this published, his translation of the New Testament into Yiddish, and his conflict with a Yiddish publisher, a printer who he doesn't tell from the outset about what the book is or what his intent is. So I found that story and I thought it's just it had the makings of a drama, and I like sort of things that have a hint of scandal about them because I think they make for compelling stories. And it was great. We hope to do it more, but we had a nice run of it, and we've taken it on the road to a couple of different places since.
Hmm.
But yeah, for me, that was really exciting. Putting on a brand new Yiddish play, apparently the first new sort of Yiddish drama that had been performed professionally for a number of decades. I do it, one, because yes, I do think it's important to create in the language if we're really sort of committed to its being a living language. Part of that is contributing new works in it
Yeah.
and writing in it, but also because in my immersion in this culture, I'm finding all these interesting stories, and the natural idiom for those stories happens to be Yiddish. That
Yeah.
happens to be the language of these characters.
Hmm.
So it's the appropriate vehicle for stories that I'm telling. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that makes me curious about, we have theater and we have drama, we have comedy, right?
Yeah.
Um, and we have musicals. We have musicals. I mean, we have Fiddler, but do
Oh,
we have?
definitely.
Okay.
A lot of Yiddish musicals and operettas.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I love a musical.
Mm.
So, um, other expressions, I know that we have books, we have poetry, we have the written stuff. Do we have music like on the radio? Do we have pop music? Do we have
Mm.
any other contemporary musical expressions through the
Oh,
Yiddish
yeah.
language? Hmm.
Yes. So you might have heard of klezmer. Klezmer is the sort of traditionally it was kind of the sort of Jewish music you'd hear being played at weddings
Okay.
and simchas, which are happy occasions. So that's this lively sort of with a touch of Eastern European and a touch of maybe American big band style with clarinet and violins and drums and wonderful music to dance to.
Hmm.
There's a lot of Yiddish folk music, and I've been for the past couple of years an apprentice of a Yiddish folk singer in the Bronx named Ethel Rame, and I go to her apartment in Riverdale, which is a great schlep from Brooklyn, but worth it because I learn old Yiddish songs from her and
Hmm.
the way they're meant to be sung. And yeah, in terms of sort of pop music, the pop music, what was very popular in its day, and people do still love it, is a group called the Berry Sisters. They were sisters. Their original name was Bagelman, but they changed it to Berry to be a little more commercial. But
Okay.
they would be on the Yiddish radio, and they sang. Yiddish standards, mostly from the Yiddish theater or folk songs, but with a sort of very jazzy, swingy kind of feel from the period they were recording in the 40s, 50s. One song that's big that became a standard in English is by Mir Bist Du Schön, which they recorded, but also the Andrews sisters recorded, and I think Ella Fitzgerald recorded. Lots of people recorded it in English translation, but
Mhm.
that started as a Yiddish theater song written by
Okay.
Sholem Secunda. By
Okay.
Mir Bist Du Schön means "To me, you're beautiful." Yeah,
Oh.
yeah,
I ask because I'm always curious about pop music.
yeah,
And, I don't know what I don't know, but I think there's so many genres of pop music, and pop now and pop 50 years ago is different
yeah.
and stuff like that. So I was just curious.
Today, I mean, to me, that's something I actually sort of, when I think about, I mean, there's a lot of joy in taking part in Yiddish, but there's some sadness too, just when you realize how much is lost and how much there could be if there hadn't been these sort of ruptures in world history.
Mm,
Um, so that's something I actually think about. Like, if the Holocaust hadn't occurred and if these millions of Yiddish speakers hadn't been wiped out, what would Yiddish culture be like in Eastern Europe today?
right.
Would we have like full-fledged Yiddish radio stations today playing Yiddish techno and dance music and pop music? And would there be a Yiddish entrant into the Eurovision Song Contest every
Mm,
year? Things
mm,
like that. They are a bit silly, but I do sort of mourn for the lack of that kind of pop culture that
yeah.
we might have in Yiddish. There are little attempts to build it in ways here and there, sort of experiments, but
Mhm.
nothing in the way of a mass pop culture. Yeah.
We need a Y-pop boy band.
Yeah. That would be very cool. Why pop? That's a great idea. Yeah.
And I can imagine actually a play about a Y-pop boy band.
Yes. I
Hmm.
have an idea for a musical. What if there were, and there isn't, but a Yiddish speaking country that
Mm,
somehow existed and the Yiddish was the language of the country?
mm.
And what if they had a figure skating team? And what would these figure skaters talk about, these Yiddish girl figure skaters? I don't know. I have one song written for it.
I love that.
But yeah, I think it's interesting to think of these sort of fantastical alternative histories and in a way to make them real. Yeah, why not have a
Yeah.
Y-pop boy band? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think to make them real through art, to
Mm,
make them real through artistic expression, it's obviously bittersweet, because there is so much of a painful history behind it, but art can really do so much.
mm.
And I think that I look forward to your figure skating
No, thank you.
Yiddish
Mm,
Yiddish figure skating team. You've also got some books out. You
mm,
have a translation of the Adventures of Max Spitzkopf. I'm saying that slowly on purpose so I don't trip over my words.
sure.
But the Yiddish Sherlock Holmes, and it's a collection of detective stories from 1908 that disappeared nearly for a century. So tell us a bit about how these stories survived and how they came across your path, and a bit about your work translating them.
Mm. It is a bit of a miracle that some of these stories survived in their original form because they were published as pulp fiction. That is, they were published on really cheap paper and were consumed widely, but were largely thrown out or just disintegrated, or eventually destroyed. Each 32 pages pamphlets, each with its own Spitzkopf story.
Mhm.
But somehow some did survive, some of these really cheaply printed on poor paper. And it was while I was working at this place called the Yiddish Book Center in Amherst, Massachusetts, that we were sent a shipment of six of the, no, five of the stories that had been bound together in one volume. And we knew about these Max Spitzkopf stories because it was a sort of legend in Yiddish literature that there was this Yiddish detective, Max Spitzkopf, and these stories about him. Um, and I set about translating them. And eventually the Yiddish Book Center asked if I would translate all 15. We didn't have all 15, but Yale does.
Okay.
So I reached out to the Yale library and they were able to send me scans of the remaining 10. And then they put it out as this book, The Adventures of Max Spitzkopf.
Oh.
Written by Joine Kreppel originally, and translated by me, and just out a few months ago. So yeah, that's fun. It's a not something everyone expects in terms of talking about sort of mass pop culture
Hmm.
and that sort of thing. This is an exemplar of that from back in the day. This is not at all highbrow literature. It's
Hmm.
adventure stories and stories of crime and rescue and heroic deeds,
Hmm.
but really exciting page turners and with sort of wild characters and dialogue. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know that there's a comparison there to Sherlock Holmes, and
Mm.
I generally try to shy away from comparisons, but leaning into that for
Yeah.
this, because that's, how you've described it.
Mm.
We have a Sherlock and we have Watson and we
Mm.
have Moriarty, and we have all these characters that are recurring in the Sherlock Holmes universe. So
Yeah.
do we see that in the Max Schwitzkopf
Mm.
universe?
Yes. And it's not something I'd be reticent about the comparison actually, because it's something the original stories advertised.
Okay.
So I wouldn't worry, but they originally was on the cover, Max Spitzkopf, der König von die Detectives, that is the king of the detectives, der Wiener Sherlock Holmes, which is
Oh,
the Viennese Sherlock Holmes.
okay.
In ours, we've decided to call him the Yiddish Sherlock Holmes because we
Mhm,
feel that's really maybe the more interesting and salient feature of these stories.
mhm,
But yeah, they were marketed that way in 1908. There are certainly influences. You have this very cunning detective and his very trusty sidekick, who in this case is named Hermann Fuchs. Hermann Fuchs is always getting into a scrape.
mhm.
He's always getting bludgeoned over the head
Oh,
by one of the
no.
bad guys on his way to thinking he's doing something really great. He's always kind of jumping into action too
Uh-huh.
rashly. Yeah. But actually, I was reading one of the Sherlock Holmes stories recently, and Sherlock Holmes criticizes Watson. He says, "You always take the energetic approach," something like that. And
Mhm,
that really is the dynamic where Fuchs is just being a little too energetic about things and getting into trouble. But then they have these scenes where Spitzkopf rescues him, and they actually, it's sort of sweet the moments of where he comes to his aid and wipes up his blood, and they have a few moments together before they go on in pursuit of the criminals.
mhm.
Um, I'd say they're each other's closest confidants. And then you have a whole array of villains. You don't have one sort of arch villain extending between different stories, but each one has uh, an antagonist or a group of antagonists, often a criminal gang. Some
Okay.
of them really, really vile. Someone told me they actually had to stop reading at
Oh,
one point
no.
because one of the stories is called Die Kindermörderin, the
Oh.
child murderess, a woman who she takes on the children of desperate mothers who have given birth out of wedlock,
Oh,
and
no.
they don't want the shame of having their children, so they give it to this lady who says she'll take care of them, and the lady takes the money and then just does away with the children.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah. But the chief way they differ from the Sherlock Holmes stories is actually just that they have this Jewish bent to them, where a lot of the crimes, not necessarily that one, but others which deal with blood libels and Jewish girls kidnapped and led into prostitution, which actually did happen, and things like that. A Jewish military officer who's accused falsely of spying for another country. A lot of them are based in real sort of Jewish stories of the time and anti-Jewish crimes. And
Okay.
he's this sort of Jewish superhero who comes to
Mm,
their aid.
okay.
So that's really what sets them apart in a way. Yeah.
Mhm. I I love that, first of
Mm.
all. Let's go back to Sherlock Holmes. That story has been reiterated and changed and brought up to date and repurposed and for so many generations. And then we have Arsène Lupin in
Mm,
France, who's been brought back to life and retold and retold with a character like a Max Spitz. I knew I was going to trip
you
over
got
it.
it.
Max Spitzkopf.
Hmm.
Uh, is there an interest? Do you have an interest? Does anyone out there have an interest
Mm.
in, reviving the character, bringing it into the modern day? Do you think that there's room for something like that nowadays?
I think definitely. I think they're really compelling stories and kind of out there and strange and interesting. Yeah, I would love to adapt them or see them adapted. They could make, I think, great series or film material. So we'll see. I've taken a small step in adapting one of them into a sort of performance that I've done once and I'm going to do again in the Boston area, both working with this wonderful Boston musician, Abigail Reisman, who's written music for one of the stories. And I've put
Mhm.
together a condensed version of the story where I play all the characters and in between, there's Abigail and her band of klezmer musicians playing a sort of period appropriate score
Okay.
and taking us through the story. And it's sort of this immersive thing. We take the audience on a sort of clue finding journey as well. So that's been really fun. But I'd like to do more in that vein. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Hmm.
That's exciting. I hope to
Mm.
see that. I really hope to see that. I think
Yeah,
that
we've
would
been
be,
calling it Meet Max
oh, I
Spitzkopf
love that. And when you
because
say it's like the audience is like finding clues and stuff, it's interactive.
yeah. We try to get a bit of interactivity about it, hide some things in the audience for them to find, and they have to read them out, and bringing them along on the journey. Yeah.
That sounds like fun.
Mm.
Oh man, Mikhl, your work is tremendous.
Thank
Your
you.
work is
Oh,
tremendous. And
likewise.
I would love for you to let our listeners know where we can find the book
Mm.
if we're ready to purchase, and where we can find your work, more of your work, so that
Mm.
we can support you and we can support
Sure.
your future
Oh,
endeavors.
well, thank you. The book can be found. I just went to the Strand bookstore a few weeks ago, the famous bookstore in Manhattan, and found it there on the shelves. So I think it's in a lot of bookstores, or you can find it anywhere online, anywhere you buy books online, or from the Yiddish Book Center's website. The Yiddish Book Center is the organization that's published the book. So if you go there, you can buy it directly from the publisher.
Mhm.
Also, just quickly do a shout out for my other book, The Mother of Yiddish Theater, Memoirs of Esther Rachel Kaminska, which you can likewise find anywhere online. This is a memoir of a Yiddish theater actress who
Mhm.
lived in Poland and sort of the pioneering woman in Yiddish theater
Mhm.
and translated her very interesting memoir.
That's exciting.
Yes, as far as my doings, probably the best place is Instagram, where I post about things I'm up to and performances I have coming up. So my name there is Mikhll Darling, Mikhl Darling. That's just after Michael Darling, who's the youngest son in the Peter Pan story,
Mhm.
and I'm the youngest son in my family, so I always felt a sort of kinship with him.
Yeah.
And my website, yashinsky.com, which is I need to update more than I do. But Instagram I update frequently. Yeah.
Okay, great. I will add the links to that in the show notes for this episode so that people who are listening will be able to click and connect with you right
Super.
away. Yeah. This
Mm.
is like, I feel like we could talk about this
Mm.
forever because my questions are infinite.
Mm.
So, but we don't have all day.
Yeah.
But I think that you've given me at least, and hopefully our listeners, such a wonderful overview of Yiddish language and culture and literature and art.
Mm.
And I always appreciate that. I always appreciate that, and I always appreciate an opportunity to learn and connect um, where possible. So I'm so grateful.
Thank you, Elle. It was really wonderful to be on. I'm so appreciative of what you're doing. I've had to listen to other episodes and, like you say, learning about other people's cultures and languages through their own words and their own experiences is really a powerful thing. So thank you.
Thank you so
Mm.
much. Um, I do want to talk a little bit more about Yiddish because I know that Yiddish is famous for wit and wordplay and emotional expressiveness. And
Mm,
like I told you, I made a list off the top of my New York City head
mm.
about the Yiddish words that I'm familiar with. Would you like to hear this list?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I've got oy vey, and please feel free to connect my pronunciation
Mm.
because,
So far, so good.
or oy gewalt, which I
Excellent.
haven't heard in decades, but somehow it did pop into my brain. I've got chutzpah, I've got klutz, schlep, which you said earlier,
Mm,
nosh, which
mm.
is a favorite word of my mother's, kvetch, shtick, tchotchke, and mensch.
Well, these are great. And these are all echte, that is to say, real, authentic Yiddish words.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people will bring up words that are some weird corruption that they've heard, but no, those are all good Yiddish words, kosher Yiddish words, I would say. Yeah.
But I feel like these are all words that no matter where you're from in New York City, if you grew up here, if you've lived here for a very long time, we've all heard these words, we've all used these words.
Yeah.
Um, and there's no, well, at least for me, I feel like there's not much explanation needed. You know, if you say
Yeah.
you had to schlep from Brooklyn all the way to Riverdale, we all feel that, regardless of our
Yes.
religious, ethnic, or background or skin color, anything. These are just such a part of the fabric of New York City. And I always say that, New York City has its own language, and I feel
Yeah,
it's made up of Yiddish. I feel it's made up of Black American English. I feel it's made up of Spanish,
totally.
Italian. So this is universal. These words are universal
Yeah.
to me. And I wonder, just like as a Yiddishist, and especially, coming from Detroit, and now
Mm.
you're here in New York, what's your kind of relation to these very New York words and hearing them all over from people from all over?
I love it. I think, as you said, it's a wonderful part of this fabric of this multi-ethnic, multilingual fabric of our language here.
Hmm.
There was that sort of funny and a bit kitschy installation of art that I think outside the Brooklyn Museum that had two letters. And if you were looking at them from one side, it said yo. And if you're looking at it from the other side, it said oi.
Hmm.
So in a way, I think that was about showing something about Black American language and Yiddish American language. And I mean, it's sort of cute, but it does say something about, I don't know, two sides of the same coin in a way. I think it's great. I like surprising people and telling them, this word you're using is a Yiddish word.
Mm,
Even just as something as simple as bagel.
yeah.
Everyone eats and loves bagel. And that's distinctly a Yiddish word that comes to us directly from Yiddish,
Hmm.
from the verb begen, which means to bend. And from that,
Oh.
we got bagel, which is a sort of bent thing.
Hmm.
One nice thing to know about bagel, not really applicable in English, but in Yiddish, it's one bagel, two bagel. That is, bagel is the plural of bagel,
Okay.
not bagels. In English, people say bagels, which is
Mhm.
okay. But my mom somehow she likes to insist, no, the plural of bagel is bagel, even in English.
Okay.
So if you want to impress someone by saying I'm getting a dozen bagel, you'll sound like a real Jew from 100 years ago. But I think, yeah, it's a lovely thing.
Yeah, you said bagel, and my brain went schmear.
Mm,
And then I thought shh, and that uh prefix that you were talking about.
mm.
So what's a schmear?
Schmieren is to spread.
Okay.
So we get that from, people call cream cheese a schmear, but that's because you spread it onto the bagel. So it's anything that you might spread.
Mhm.
Officially in Yiddish, cream cheese is called schmierkäse, which means
Schmierkäse.
spreading cheese. But
Aha.
yeah, comes from that. Yeah.
That's
And the fun thing about schmieren, it can also be used to mean to bribe. So you're sort of smearing or spreading someone in a way, doing something nice for them so as to bribe them.
oh my
So
goodness.
especially unterschmieren, to underschmier someone is
Hmm.
to bribe them. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Oh my gosh. I love when words tell a story. And
Mm.
obviously, all words tell a story, but I mean, the story is
Yeah,
encapsulated in the word or the phrase that we're hearing. Oh
totally.
man. Was there anything? I know you said you love telling people you know that word you're using is Yiddish.
Mm.
Was there one that maybe you have a favorite that you've told someone, or maybe one that someone was completely blown away
Mm.
by, aside from me and the schmear?
One that people really, not even Jews, realize that it's a Yiddish word is glitch.
Glitch.
Yeah. Which, when you say it, it sort of sounds like it might be Yiddish, but people don't really stop and think. But it is from glitch, which means to slide, glitchen,
Hmm.
to slide or to slip. So somehow that entered into our language, meaning a sort of slip in the technology in some way, something that goes wrong. But that's from Yiddish.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna write this, add this to my list.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one that's it's lost all. I mean, sometimes when you hear oi or mensch or things like that, a lot of people might know, hopefully, maybe, that they're Yiddish, but glitch is one that's just been so integrated into English, it's lost all flavor of that, really. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it's very plain now.
yeah.
But now that I know it's got this flavor behind it, it's a more exciting word. And one thing
Yes.
I loved so much, and not to, no, I love this. I'm proud of this. I love
Mm.
the nanny. I don't know
So do
anyone
I.
who grew up in the day who
Yeah,
didn't love Fran Drescher and the nanny.
totally.
But there was so much Yiddish in
Mm.
that show, and so much proudly Yiddish, and
Yeah.
proudly sharing this culture, and not only Yiddish but also New York culture. And just how, what do you remember people's reactions kind of being like? And just as a Yiddishist, even hearing the words, like what did that make you feel?
I mean, I grew up watching it also and loving it and loving the references to this language and culture. It's still a touch point for people, definitely, in talking about Yiddish. I
Hmm.
mean, I've talked to Jews who I'll ask if they know Yiddish, if they speak Yiddish, and they'll say, just as much as what was in the nanny,
Okay.
or just what I've gotten from watching the nanny. So it has been helpful, I think, in educating and in sharing some of this language with people. There are some really funny bits.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad it was a positive representation.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think so. I think she was intent on that,
Hmm.
Fran Drescher, on sharing that in a positive way, in a funny way, in a silly way, but not in a sort of mocking way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And that show is timeless for me. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that show
yeah.
backwards and forwards. I've really enjoyed having this conversation with you, and I like to end each episode on the same question just to have a little bit of fun. Do you have any jokes, popular sayings, tongue
Mm,
twisters, cool slang words, idioms, words of wisdom, or words of advice in Yiddish to share and to teach us?
okay. So I was thinking, this is the holiday of Passover, and one popular food on the holiday is gefilte fish.
Okay.
Not everyone loves gefilte fish,
Hmm.
but I thought I would show this gefilte fish and talk about a few things you see on the label that are Yiddish, that are related to some interesting Yiddish things. So, for
Okay.
instance, kosher, we know the word kosher means Jews can eat it, but you can also use it more widely to mean that's acceptable, that's valid. Like
Right.
that's a kosher Yiddish word, as I said
Hmm.
earlier. Pareve. It says here, this is a word that people will see on some food
Yeah.
labeling, but they may not know what it means. Do you know what it
Hmm.
means?
I don't, but I have seen it many
Yeah.
times.
Pareve means neither meat nor milk. And Jews have this specific law around you can't mix meat and milk. So
Hmm.
they have to know whether it's dairy or whether it's pareve. So this
Okay.
is pareve. Fish is considered not meat. It's considered in the same category as eggs or vegetables, anything that's not meat or dairy.
Okay.
But pareve is also funny because you can use it to describe a person who's a bit neither here nor there, a bit bland, a bit wishy-washy, is a sort of a
Oh,
pareve person.
okay.
And then gefilte fish itself, I thought there is an interesting idiom with gefilte fish and a proverb. Gefilte fish means filled fish or stuffed fish.
Okay.
Um, but there's an expression, besser gefilte Fisch, eider gefilte Zores, which means better stuffed fish than stuffed troubles.
Oh.
Zores is also a word that gets heard a lot, but it's troubles, woes, bad things that can happen to a person. Besser gefilte Fisch wie gefilte Zores. Better stuffed fish than stuffed troubles. It's a weird one, but a funny one. Yeah.
Can you teach me how to say that?
Yeah. So besser is better.
Besser,
Yeah, besser. And you've got a great gefilte
gefilte,
fish.
besser, gefilte. Let me write this down while we're
Yeah.
talking. Besser, to fish.
Wie
Besser.
gefilte Zores.
Wie gefilte Zores.
Yeah, that's it. Besser gefilte Fisch wie gefilte Zores.
Wie gefilte Zores. All right.
Very nice.
So much Yiddish. I'm
Yes.
excited about this. Gefilte fish. How are we eating it? What do we do with it? What's it taste like?
Have you had it?
No.
It's very much an acquired taste. It's a food that people like to make fun of. But I love it and grew up eating it. This one is carp and silver carp, but it can be made from any combination of fish, carp, whitefish, and it's hacked together, and you add onion and egg and matzo meal, and very often there are a few techniques to cooking it, but very often today it's poached in a sort of flavorsome broth and served. And you eat it as these sort of boiled fish croquettes in a way, but poached and with horseradish, or chrein as it's called in Yiddish.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the best way to eat it. And with a bit of challah or matzah if you're eating it on Passover.
Okay. So is it a main or a side?
Usually before the main. So it's its own course.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, where they serve the gefilte fish.
So are there many ways to make it, or does...
Well, like you said, things are embedded in a word. History is embedded in a word. So gefilte means stuffed. So why is this thing that's basically a boiled fish ball called stuffed fish? Because it's not really stuffed the way I described. The reason is because it used to be made in a different way, where they would take a fish, remove all the meat from the fish, mix it up in the way I described with these other ingredients, eggs, onions, matzo meal, and then put it back into the fish skin and roast it in the oven.
Okay.
So that was actually stuffed fish, and that's why it's called that. Now it's usually made differently, but that is an older method of making it that some people still use.
I see. Is anyone eating it straight out of the jar?
Yes, me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's good straight out of the jar from the fridge, but with horseradish is definitely an improvement. Yeah.
I really want to try this. I don't know when I will have an opportunity to, but I want to, because I want to try everything. So
yeah, someday we'll have to have you for a Seder.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm ready to experience a Seder.
Yeah.
During Passover. I'm excited about that. So I'm ready whenever. Just tell me
for sure.
Tell me when to be there, and I will be there. Mikhll, thank you so much again for this conversation. And as you can tell, I've had a blast talking with you about all things Yiddish. Before I let you go, quick question. After you've been talking to someone for quite some time, but now it's time for you to go your separate ways. In Yiddish, what is the best way to say goodbye?
Sei gesund.
I should have added that to my list because I know that one too. Sei gesund.
Sei gesund.
Sei gesund.
Literally, be healthy.
Oh, man, I never knew what that meant.
Yeah, and then if you want to be really sweet, you can extend the greeting. So someone says sei gesund, and you can answer sei gesund und stark.
Und stark.
Be healthy and strong. Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah. I'm geeking out over here.
So if I say to you sei gesund, you can answer sei gesund und stark.
Sei gesund und stark.
Punkt Azoi. Exactly right. Yeah.
Mikhl, sei gesund.
Sei gesund und stark, Elle.
And I'll be talking to you soon.
Very
Bye.
good. Goodbye.
New episodes of Speaking Tongues are available every Monday, 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to like and share episodes with other language lovers like yourselves.